Hi, this is Doug from Leshy Labs, and I'm going to give a little introduction to our new program, Leshy Fractal Explorer. So, Leshy Fractal Explorer is an HTML5 fractal browser. It's got a lot of customizations and a lot of features, and it can be found by going to leshylabs.com. And you can go, right now it's on the front page, so you can just click on it to launch it, and it will show up in a moment here. And here we go. So here you can see we have the standard Mandelbrot fractal, and you could do all the things you would expect a fractal browser to be able to do. So if you want to pan, there's a lot of ways of doing everything. If you want to pan, you can use the arrow keys, up, down, left, right, or you can use the right mouse button. Just hold down the right mouse button while dragging, and you can get a more accurate pan like that. If you want to zoom in or out, you can you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in or the mouse wheel to zoom out. You could also use the keyboard, plus key or minus key. As you notice, the keyboard will zoom in and out towards the center of this viewport, whereas the mouse wheel zooms in and out towards wherever you're pointing with the cursor. You can also do the Fractant style box zoom like this, where you just drag and create a box, and then it takes you to that area. So if you see a detail that you like over here, you just make a box by it, and it takes you right into there. You'll notice that there's a button bar down here, and this is a way of getting quickly started without having to learn many keys or anything. It provides very limited functionality, but you can do things like switching between fractals in this or changing the coloring modes. Um, you can reset, you can take screenshots, and you could also switch into full screen mode, which we'll get to. So as you can see, there's a lot of different fractals. We have a large variety of variants of the Mandelbrots and the Julias. Here's the Burning Ship fractal. We got a lot of different Newtons. They're a little slower, so I'm not going to use them right now. So we have some pretty normal ones and some pretty wacky ones like this. And here, if you go in the upper right corner, you'll notice that there's a settings here that you can just click on, and it brings up this dialog here, and different tabs that lets you configure and customize a large number of different things. So let's say we want to go back to Mandelbrot, we could just do that right over here. Everything has keyboard keys though. When you hover over these, it'll tell you what the keys are, like F is to switch fractal over here. And you'll notice with the keyboard, you could also press the Shift key while holding down many keys to go in reverse. So if F takes you forward, Shift and F will take you back one fractal. C takes you to the next coloring mode, and Shift and C take you back. And this is repeated throughout the program. It makes it very easy to repeatedly hit keys to try experimenting with different modes and filters. And some of the keys that come in handy, the D key will change the number of iterations. You'll notice when you zoom in sometimes that things kind of start getting kind of smoothed out, and that's because we're at a very low iteration count for performance reasons. By default, we're only at 100 iterations over here. So, but if you press the D key, it'll raise the iterations. It just raised it to 250, and so the details got a lot more. You can keep going, and you'll notice the iterations also changes the colors, which means it's possible to find a lot of different colors with different iteration settings, and sometimes even changing it in here. The D key will only change it to predefined values, but you can modify it in here to any value. You can even choose really low values that might not look as good, especially at that zoom level. Yeah, but you could see how a low value like that on this one doesn't have many details, and if we raise it, suddenly all the details are there. Another type of filter that we have is the Z color mode, and some things that it does will be familiar. Like if you hit the Z key here, it smoothed out everything, and you get this smooth kind of shading, and that's useful in a lot of places. But there's also a lot of modifications, and this is a filter that takes the final Z value and the iteration count and uses it to come up with a new iteration count before passing it to the color mode. And so some of these will be very odd. Some of them won't work well in some situations, but some of them actually produce really good results. And they all work in combination with different color modes. So different color modes and different Z modes will produce very different things. And sometimes on different fractals, you'll get completely different results by just trying out different values. And everything's set up so you just keep hitting keys and trying to find and explore and see what you come up with. And if you ever get too messed up, you can always just press the R key and it'll reset all the modes to the default. We also support auto zooming. Auto zooming is often called fractal zooming, where you can press the A key and it'll start zooming in, and you can press Shift and A, of course, to zoom out, or A to zoom in. And if you press it again, it stops. And you'll notice that the quality gets very blurry when you're doing that. It also gets blurry like that when you're panning. And this is actually all customizable. By default, it's set for people with slower computers, but you can come in here and you can change the low quality scale is what it's called for that. And let's say we change it to 4. That means to draw 1 out of every 4 pixels, or draw at 25% size and scale it up is another way of saying that. So now you'll notice that the quality is quite a bit better. It's still pixely, but that's because we're only drawing 1 out of every 4 pixels. You could go all the way down to 1, but you'll see that the performance starts to get worse as you go inward. So we'll leave it for now. You could actually save these settings over here by checking them and hitting Save to Local Storage, and then you won't have to change it every time you run it. It'll remember it for you. Now, auto zooming zooms where you're pointing with the mouse, so if you see something interesting, you can just point to it and it'll start going in that direction. You can also modify any of the modes while zooming, and everything in this program is pretty customizable. If you wanted to change the speed, you could do that too. Let's go really fast, and that might be too fast. Let's try this, and now you can see we're zooming really quickly and could steer with the mouse, and it gets a little crazy at this speed. I'm going to change it back to something more reasonable, but that's not the right setting. So there's a lot of customizations, and if you have a fast computer, you can make the quality better. The quality can always be made full quality at trading off for performance, and if you have a fast machine, you could do that. So let's see. Another thing that would be useful to go over is the zoom color modes. If you look under Fractal here, there's zoom color modes, and this is another type of filter that uses the level of the zoom to also manipulate the number of iterations passed to the coloring function. And so this can get all sorts of weird effects. Like as you can see, things are morphing in shape, and sometimes the colors morph, sometimes it pulsates, and there's a lot of different modes like this. Some of them work well in some situations, and some of them don't work at all in a lot of situations. But everything works somewhere. If you just play around, you'll find situations where different ones work very well. I mean, here's another example of just things morphing with auto zooming with a zoom color mode enabled. And like I said, those can be changed over here in the Fractal tab, and you can try different ones. Another useful setting is the bailout over here. If you change the bailout, this is the escape value in fractals that are escape time, like all the Mandelbrot's and Julia fractals, for example, not the Newton fractals though. And that'll greatly alter the fractal in interesting ways, and sometimes you can get interesting views by doing this. And things kind of fall apart a lot easier at the low bailout levels, but you can find all sorts of different fractals that look interesting and will color differently by doing that. There's also fractal audio, which if you press the P key, you'll notice this red dot appears, and it starts scanning, kind of like a needle going over a record player. It's scanning over the viewport, and if the viewport moves, it'll adjust with that. And so it's going over nothing over there, so it's kind of gotten boring, but let's try it on this. So you'll see when it's going over a single color, it's kind of dull, but when it gets to the noisier areas of the fractal, it picks up. And there are a lot of possible customizations here, and some things will sound great and some things will sound awful, and you kind of have to play around to find something good. You can change the timing. There's plenty of instruments to choose from. Some of them will give you very different types of sounds. And there's weird noisemaker modes that don't use the instruments. And so you can get all sorts of different sounds by playing around. I think I had another example here. I thought it was going to use the bell instrument, so let's just try changing the instrument just to make it interesting. So that might be a little close there. But you can get all sorts of different sounds, and some things sound like music, and some things don't quite sound like music. And you could do anything. You could zoom while doing it. You could have everything else going on, and everything will affect the music except for the color mode, which has no effect. That could be the audio could also be played in a different way, where if you use the middle mouse button in fractals that support it while holding down, or you hold down the spacebar, it'll play the fractal where the mouse is moving, so you can kind of play the fractal as if it was an instrument. With certain modes, it can get kind of predictable, and you can do interesting things. And most of the time, it's hard to control. Now, Chrome and Firefox perform very differently with the audio. IE won't even work with audio because we use the SF Maker library, and it uses WAV files, and IE 10 for some reason doesn't support WAV files. Chrome supports it, but at least in Linux, audio gets pretty bad and eventually crashes the browser. In Firefox, it works perfectly, but in Firefox, performance is worse, so you get these trade-offs. And everything will change and get better, but at the current time, if you're doing mostly audio, I'd recommend Firefox, and if you're doing anything else, Chrome is definitely the best choice because it performs far better than most of the other browsers. Now, one feature that people like is the full screen mode, and you can access it here in the button bar. You could also press Alt-Enter in browsers that support it to toggle full screen. The button bar tends to be an easy way to get there, and you'll notice it didn't actually go full screen, it goes full window. And if you wanted to go full screen in browsers that support that, you can press F11 in most browsers. Some browsers have different keys, but F11 seems to be the most common. And in full screen, everything performs just a little bit worse. I mean, depending on how big your browser window is. And it'll always scale to however big your browser window is. And if you have a giant browser window, or if you're truly going full screen at a high resolution, things will perform badly. But you can always tweak everything. You can tweak the low quality scale and the quick draw scale over here, and that'll make it responsive again. No matter how unresponsive it gets, you can always make it responsive by doing that. And then the high quality scale, the high quality render, it's when you stop, will always be done at whatever settings are specified too. So you can always get the high quality ones even on slower machines. You just have to wait a bit longer. Now, performance is worse on the Newton fractals. So when you go to the Newton fractals, in a bad mode, there we go. When you go to the Newton fractals, you can see it drawing out the high quality render, and now it's going to be very slowly rendering the anti-aliasing draw. And you'll notice that it's actually doing it in multiple places if you look very carefully. It's scanning probably in 4 different places with these settings to do the anti-aliasing draw. Everything gets broken up over web workers, which are threads, so everything multi-threads. And it tries to determine the number of web workers when you initialize the program, but it doesn't always get it right. You should play around with the web workers value and find what seems to work best for you and save that here, because if you get a bad value there, everything will take notably longer to render. But usually it's not too far off in Chrome and Firefox. Some other browsers could be a little more unpredictable in how accurately they guess how many cores to use. As I was saying before, if you're finding things unresponsive, raise the number of the low quality scale and the quick draw scale. You can find a lot more details in the documentation to what things mean. But if you raise these, the drawing won't look nearly as good when you're panning and things like that. It'll be much more pixelated, but at least it'll be responsive, and so you won't get that kind of jerky reaction that you otherwise might get. We do an anti-aliasing pass, as I was saying, and you can control how much anti-aliasing to do, or you can even turn it off completely. The anti-aliasing makes everything, right now it looks kind of pixely. Eventually, since we're in a Newton mode, it's kind of slow, but you could see it's getting there, and it's anti-aliasing, I think, at 8 times. We use random sampling, so you don't really want to use low values, but you can raise them and get some good pictures and high-quality renders that way. Now, as I was saying, advanced settings is great for saving preferences, so you can save them to local storage, and then every time you reopen Fractal Explorer, you'll have your settings again, so you won't have to keep changing them every time you run the program or reload the page. Another thing that comes in handy, you could always press Escape to exit full screen mode, by the way, and if you ever want to share a Fractal, you can share the application down here. These will all share the application, or you can press the Share button, and that'll bring up this dialog that lets you share a link to the actual fractal. And as you can see, this direct link here, you can copy and paste it, or you can, if you open it, you'll notice that this changes. Here. Well, that's just great. But I don't know what's happening there, but you'll notice. There we go. You'll notice that it just changes the URL here, and so if you were to email somebody this link, it would actually take them directly, as you can see, into the fractal that you were looking at with all your settings. And so that's comes in handy for being able to share them. Now there's also some sample links down here, as you can see, for some examples of the types of things that you can generate with this program. And all of these are links, and you can click on them. So if you click on this, for example, it takes you right in, and it'll take you right to that fractal that you were looking at, and that can be accessed here. You can also access the introduction here, which is a blog post that goes over basic explanations of what things mean, common key combinations, and explanations of what different filters mean. And it's still a work in progress, but we also over here had a link to the documentation. And this is much more thorough, but it's probably much less readable. It goes over everything in a lot more detail. I need to put a little bit more in here, but right now you can read this and find out in more detail over what these settings actually mean and what they do. And anyway, I think that's all that I'm going to go over now. There's a lot more features, and I recommend playing around and exploring. And I hope you enjoyed the program, and take care.